It's the getting through grad roles and the pandemic for me. Good morning, afternoon, evening. I'm in a new flat in London, just up the road actually from my old flat, but I've started my grad role, which is amazing and super exciting, and I haven't really processed that. I'm an adult. A whole adult. Anyway, I thought I'd do this video because I actually have had a lot of questions about my grad role, but also more importantly how I got my grad role. Now, your girl got this job in the middle of the pandemic and actually got all of her offers in the middle of the pandemic. I didn't get any offers pre-pandemic, so pre-March time I actually received the job I'm currently doing now. I received that a week and a half before we went into lockdown, so you know, Miss Rona was here. Miss Rona was here to stay, to say the least. So my role as a graduate trainee, I am working for a women's charity, which is kind of unreal. Like, I always thought I'd go into charity post maybe having a career in like corporate or, you know, some sort of job that I really didn't like that much, but just, you know, gotta make the money. And I was super lucky, and I think that's going to be the first thing I'm going to talk about, applications. So in my second year I applied for, I think it was 40 internships, and I got rejected from every single one. Not one offer. In fact, I had one telephone interview. I wasn't even getting through to like assessment centres, and I panicked. I panicked the fuck out because I was like, when you're at certain universities on certain courses, it's a huge emphasis to get an internship in second year, and all of my friends had internships. Now, in hindsight, this was the biggest blessing to ever occur to me because I then injured my leg, you know, the whole knee story, we don't need to get into that. But I was unable to do an internship because I spent all summer in hospital. So, worked out for the best, you know, maybe God's plan or whatever. That meant when it came to doing applications in September, I was not only dealing with the fact that I was severely injured and unable to walk and how that would hinder my applications, but number two, I was also with the fact that I didn't have an internship. My experience on my CV was not, at the time I thought, not amazing, but actually through the process, which I'll get to, I realised I had a pretty strong CV. So my first tip is do not panic if you do not have an internship, because at the end of the day, I didn't have any, and I secured 3 grad role offers. I can't lie, it's still a shock to me that I got 3 grad role offers, because I think actually it was a shock to a lot of people, just because I'm not, like, I've always been very middle ground academic. My uni I did well, but not like amazing, and it was just, I've just been all very average is what I'd say. But actually I realised I'm not that average of a candidate by the looks of things. So on the flip side of that, experience is so important. I cannot like stress this enough. So I started working when I was 16, and that was mainly retail jobs. So in the UK, and this also applies to applications in the UK, I did not apply outside the UK. Most places will expect you to have had a part-time job, whether that's either through retail, which most people do, unfortunately with Corona, who knows, or they'll expect you to have some sort of job that shows that you've essentially got the skills to not only work in real work, but also the skills to have applied and secure that job and just have a bit of initiative outside of studying. I know this is not easy for everyone. For example, I was able to have the luxury in order to have the time to take my jobs, like e.g. in sixth form I could take jobs, and then at uni I only had 8 hours contact, so I could take jobs. On the other side of that, if it wasn't a paid job they were expecting experience that was either volunteering or that was charity. My biggest saving grace was how active I was at university. If it's not experience in having a retail job or anything like that, which I think you can really, even if you're in your first year of applications and you're applying for internships or grad roles, get a job now, even if it's something that's volunteering or like an online internship, anything that shows experience, even just doing NCS and all these things that people joke about having your CV, it just shows you're beyond your academics. Because realistically, the people applying to these grad roles, it's just a criteria to me. It's not, unfortunately, anymore something special. Like, it's amazing you've done your degree, and you know, to you it means the world, but to employers it doesn't. Like, that's just a criteria you're expected to meet. So a 2-1, getting your degree, or a 2-2, that's the bare minimum essentially. So you have to have more to stand out to see the candidate. And let me tell you, these applications as well, they get, I mean, for the job I'm currently in, I was 1 out of 400 people to get it. For another one, there was 150 out of 4,000. Like, it's insane, because one, companies know they can use the fact that they need grads and they need manpower, but they can be picky in who they get. 2, grads are desperate for jobs, especially in Corona times, and especially now there's going to be even less jobs available. I know a lot of schemes aren't running this year, or they're delayed to 2021. That's why experience is so important. So at university, not only did I take part-time retail jobs, I also did a lot in societies. Do I think you need to be part of a specific society? Maybe. So my finance friends, I know a lot of them try to be treasurers in societies or try to go into the finance societies. Myself, I just did societies that I found important to me. So I was president of King's Sikhs, which I talked about in my university video, which you can go look at that if you want to. And then I also was head of sponsorship and charity at the KSL Diwali show. And on top of that, I also did a lot of work in the SU, the student union, in regards to interfaith and inclusion. So, and I also was an election disciplinary officer. So I did quite a bit, not too much to the point that I was like overwhelming myself with society stuff, but enough to put on my CV and talk about. On top of that, I was lucky that when I was younger, I did a lot of extracurriculars, e.g. ballet. I had on my CV, I was grade 7. I had things such as I went to Tanzania for a month on an expedition, I did a global social leaders program. All of this on my CV showed that although I hadn't had an internship or I hadn't had a paid job beyond retail, I was capable of much more and that I had interests outside my studies, because showing your employer that you are multifaceted, along with the fact that you can, they don't want to hear in your interview that you can balance time, they can see that through what you've done on your CV. The actual application themselves, they are nasty as hell. My best friend and me, he was also applying at the same time, he's in finance, but we literally would go to uni in the day, stay up all night doing applications, and he did far more than me. I think I applied to 30 this year. I applied for 30 grad roles, and obviously I got 3, which is unusually high. Most people only get 1, and that's not even to brag about myself. Like, I was shook. So not a brag at all. At first I was applying for all like the major places and like big grad schemes, I guess, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I think that's okay when you're applying for applications. My personal opinion and advice, apply for everything. If you're unsure and you're not in like the finance sector, for example, just keep applying. Anytime I saw something vaguely interesting, I just applied, because I was like, well, I'll assess what I get at the end of the year and then make my decision from there, and that was always my motto, and that's exactly what I did. So in these applications, they're all really different, but standards are that you generally have either CV, cover letter, or maybe just some few questions about why you want to apply, and eligibility, that's always in there. Then number 2, it tends to be either a skills test, or it could be maybe something, again, those competency questions. It's always kind of that kind of thing. Maybe a pre-recorded video interview, sometimes those two. Then like stage 3 tends to be either maybe you'll have a phone interview, or maybe you'll have a video interview then if you've done the skills test before, or maybe at that point you will skip on to a face-to-face interview. Now if your grad scheme has assessment centres, after that point, either stage 2 or 3, you'll have an assessment centre. That assessment centre will be essentially, and obviously at each stage they cut down the number of applicants, but that assessment centre, I think, from what I remember, that assessment centre will have more than just you. So it's essentially an interview, but it's several parts to it, and it'll be maybe a day or half a day long. So only one of my grad schemes had, actually no, 2 of my grad schemes had assessment centres and 1 didn't. So first I'm going to talk about the 2 that did. So the 2 that did, one was the National Graduates Development Programme, which is through the local council. That one was a really interesting one, because I actually went, again, it was like a week before Corona kicked in, lockdown wise, obviously it kicked in before. But I remember going to the place and we had a group interview, which is really common. So either be group interview or group task. So you maybe get set a task, and what they're doing there is they're assessing how well you can work in a group. In a group interview or task, my best advice is be yourself, because the people that try and shout above, you're automatically not going to do well. Like, they essentially cross you out, because that's not what you're realistically going to do in a team meeting. Number 2, someone who's too quiet simultaneously, that's not going to work. My biggest thing that I always do is I always try to bring in people who are being quiet. I'll ask them what their opinion is, or I'll do things where I always wait till someone speaks and try and keep whatever the task is. A lot of people go off topic and other discussions come up. Keep trying to guide the conversation. I think that's a really good tip. But like I said, that's a whole nother video. If you want me to do that, I'm happy to do it. If not, also, not really ask for my opinion. But the one I had was actually over Zoom, which I think a lot of these are going to be now, and that was back in, not actually that long ago, it was in June, and it was for Charity Works. And that also consisted of a one-to-one interview, which was also in the National Graduate one. The National Graduate one, I had to put a pitch together from a task they gave me. I think I had about 15 minutes to put it together. Then they asked questions, and then it was a written task that we had to do on a computer there. And then the Charity Works one, I had a written task I had to do, group one and also the one-to-one. So that's generally what they tend to be in assessment centres. I rarely doubt they go differently. Maybe in finance you'll have like competency maths wise, on IT maybe, you know, IT wise, but these are like the general ones. And then in my other one, which is the job I took, I actually think is where I excelled most, which is also why I preferred the process. I had a first stage interview which was with my now manager, and that was just more of an informal one. Then the second one was an interview where I had to prepare a pitch kind of thing, and then was interviewed, and then went for a work lunch. Now a lot of companies will start doing this, smaller companies especially, they will have grad lunches. I don't know how well that will work in corona times, but they do that because they want to see how you are in a social setting and when you're a bit more relaxed, not in an interview room. So remember, that is also an interview. I kept that in mind, and there were certain people who I went on that lunch with and I was like, you have just blown any chances of getting this job. So anyway, that was the application process. Then, so I applied September, I started applying, and I finished applying I think end of January is where I set my limit, because I was so behind on uni work and had my dissertation stuff to write. I did not get my first interview until February. I received rejection after rejection after rejection. And I'm not even talking about the DMs from men, I'm talking about the grad applications. Like, it was brutal, but also the best thing I've ever had. These rejections humbled me. It made me realise not everyone gets a grad role, and I need to up my game. Like, a lot of the first applications I went through, I look back, like, I completely changed my CV during the process. I learnt what these companies want. When they're doing the skills test, for example, they're not looking for set answers, they're looking for you to be in line with your thinking. So a lot of them will be like, how would you react in this situation? Then they may ask a slightly different version of the same question later on. They're looking for those to match, less so than it being the right answer as such. Obviously some companies do, but that's just like my general experience of that. But yeah, like, each rejection taught me something. I realised, okay, what point have I been rejected? I had this massive spreadsheet, which I will show here or somewhere. I had this massive spreadsheet and I thought, okay, where am I going wrong? And I realised actually it was always at the second stage, so around the test side, or like CV submitting. So that's where I really changed up. Once I got to those stages, and all three that I got interviews at assessment centres and then the grad scheme for, I actually applied for in December, January time, so the latter end of my applications. All of those, I had honed in my skills to the point that I knew face-to-face in an interview, I could do that. That wasn't hard for me. It was the before that was the problem. Now we're at the point where I've got these assessment centres and I was like, shit. And the charity I ended up working for was my first one. It was my first interview for a grad role. And I think it's so unique in all these interviews, and like I've talked about the assessment centres, and I realised at the end of it is the ones I got offered for were stuff that actually really I was made to do. And that's not even like a cringe cliche way, even though it does sound it. More in the sense that my experience was charity based, my experience was policy based or things like that, and actually they're the roles I got offered in. When I was applying for maybe marketing, or I was applying for stuff like, I did NY5 at one point, you know, stuff like that, that it just wasn't within my realm. And also realistically, if I'd got those jobs I wouldn't have been good at it. So I do think you naturally just tend to do better at the applications that you're meant to do. And I know a lot of people that apply maybe to Big Four or finance, and they're just, but they could do so much better for themselves and what they want in their career. But yeah, anyway, then I got offered this role in March, yeah, the week before I went to Paris. And then I actually got my other two whilst I was in lockdown. So I received, I think my next offer, I think it was end of June, and then my third offer end of July. Yeah, end of July. So really late actually. And I think that's the other thing, don't lose faith. I was a bit petrified I wouldn't get something. I took my degree because I promised my dad I would get a job. It wasn't looking likely at one stage. Yes, I had a lot on my leg, etc. and stuff like that, but I still persevered. I will say that applications are a full-time job essentially, and could I have done better in my degree? Probably, if I didn't have applications, but for me I just needed my 2-1. I didn't particularly care about how well I did. I knew that my first out the window, I just needed my 2-1. That was meant that I focused very heavily on applications, and I do think if you want a grad role and that's your focus, you do have to give it the right amount of time. Don't do these applications half-hearted, don't rush them, because it's just not worth it, and that's what I was doing at the beginning. I mean, I had friends having offers in like September, they'd done internships, had offers, September, October, like January, and I was one of the few people that hadn't got an offer at that point, and it was nerve-wracking because I was like, maybe, you know, after the internship flow and then this, you know, I was getting rejection email after rejection email. I was like, maybe there's something, I'm just not made for this. I even thought about a master's. God, I even thought about going to America at one point for a master's. Like, I don't know where sis thought the money was coming from, but it was all just things like I panicked and want to do it. And that's why you see a lot of people do panic masters. But actually, like, I realised going through the process that I was not alone. And I think, you know, when I realised, for example, I was 1 out of 400 to get my job, like, that's an insane amount. And I think that makes you realise that not everyone gets a grad role. And that's the biggest myth ever. You go into uni, you think internship, grad role, bam, job. It's actually not true. Like, a lot of people I know are figuring life out, and there's a lot going on at uni that you go through and changes. I talked about that in a previous video, but people always said to me, you're so lucky. And yes, I am so fortunate, so blessed. But also simultaneously, it wasn't just that. I was on crutches, I could barely walk. I had to explain to these employers that I didn't know my capability and my physical capability in jobs. That was something I didn't have to combat before, and I think in that I realised that actually this was all me, and I didn't have help, I did not have inside connections. I come from a family that, my parents were grafters, you know, they hadn't gone to universities, they had no experience of any of this. My friends didn't really have experience of this. Me and my friend, like I said, helped each other through, but it was me. It was all me, you know, I didn't have a connection who could get me through like a first round or second round like a lot of people did. And also a lot of people didn't, let me put that out there. Didn't have any connections, I didn't have experience, and I managed to do this. And I think if you're willing to keep getting back up, I think that's the main thing. My last 5 years, I've consistently faced challenge after challenge, and one thing I've just kept telling myself is get back up. Get back up. There are a lot of people as well where if you're applying for grad roles or masters and not sure, some people are just made for academics, and that's also great and that's perfectly fine, and you do you. But some people are just made for jobs, and you don't have to be the brightest, you don't have to be all the things I think unfortunately we're kind of nurtured to in going through school for so many years, that actually there's far wider range of skills out there. I mean, all my employers barely, I think, had a brief look at my education. A lot of it was, what did you learn from this experience? So things on my CV, what did you learn from this? How did this shape you? What would you do in this situation? And I just think that any job that is right for you will be a natural fit, and it will just happen. But yeah, my biggest advice is don't lose faith, because if I had, I wouldn't be where I am today. But I'm really willing to talk about, I've realised since doing this video that there's actually a lot for me to unpack. Like, I'm so happy to go through assessment centres or stuff like that. But yeah, I guess hopefully there's been some tips in here in the midst of the rambling, or maybe you've just realised that, I'll put out there, it's a pandemic. The job market is going to be at its worst. It already is at its worst for about 3-4 years, and it's only going to get worse. And I think it's okay to give yourself a break. Like, at one point, the reason I put a limit on applications, I was like, I can only do so much too. You know, you can apply for 1,000 jobs, but if it's not the right timing, or if it's not the right job, then it's never going to work. I think that's something I really had to come to terms with, and lucky as I am to be a graduate trainee in a grad role, I think a lot of companies lose out on talent, and not everyone, like I said a million times, not everyone gets a grad role. And you know, if it doesn't work with graduate roles, go for entry level. I know so many people that took the time, focused on their uni, come July, start applying for entry level and we're in work by September. You know, there's not a limit or a time limit on when you need to be a new grad, and enjoy the time off. Like, I realised I will no longer get long summer holidays and all these things I miss. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you know, if you want to learn more, comment below. Again, like I said, also if you want to know more like life about being a grad, it's apparently all I talk about now, being a graduate trainee, because let's be honest, when you start working, that does become part of your personality. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and if you liked it, like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you very soon.